It's safe to say that Sonic Mania caused a lot of big impacts on the Sonic series after its release. Of course, it brought classic Sonic back into focus in a big way and proved that many people wanted to see more of that gameplay style, and more superficially, it gave Sonic one of his new recurring abilities in the drop dash. But it does tend to somewhat swamp itself in nostalgia, especially when it comes to the actual levels of the game. Only about a quarter of the zones are new, so it means that it's a fairly big deal when one comes up, especially when it's the big new zone for the game. For Mania, that zone is Studiopolis, named after the recording studio a lot of Sega music is created at, and it's a blast to play, so let's get into it. Having jumped into a sewer at the end of Chemical Plant, Sonic and Tails found themselves in a new city on Westside Island, the glimmering nighttime metropolis, Studiopolis, and immediately, we can see more or less what this level is about, with neon signs everywhere, flickering LCD TVs, and plenty of disaerials. It's a vaporwave lover's dream, if you can ignore the oh so many bumpers that litter just about every part of the stage. I take it pretty slow at first, because it's been a long time since I played Mania and couldn't really remember the fastest route, so I settle for collecting an invincibility monitor and taking the high road through several beaming apartments. I think it's safe to say whoever lives in these rooms need to look at turning off a light or 20. I end up in a Hornet van where Sonic is transformed into a TV broadcast. I'm sure if the background music wasn't playing, we'd be hearing his screams of agony, as I imagine that's not a natural thing to do, before collecting a bubble shield and being introduced to another of the zone's many bouncy gimmicks. I genuinely have no idea what these actually are or called, so I always just went with wipeout orbs. I lose my bubble shield to these mic drops, perfect name, before ending up in the Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop to be launched up to a higher area. Having made a mistake attempting to perform a speedrunning trick on the uppermost level of the act, I end up stumbling across a new big ring, which I happily jump into to claim a new Chaos Emerald. It isn't the most exciting chase, but I do end up collecting my second emerald, which hopefully puts me in good stead to actually unlock Super Sonic in this playthrough. With some newfound confidence, I speed through the next section, only to get stuck up on some bumpers before losing my rings to an Orbinaut. Then Tails gets stuck on some springs somewhere while I'm bouncing between aerials, so I'm serenaded by this. This is right before the act boss though, the Heavy Gunner. Fun fact, this is the only hard-boiled heavy act as a mini-boss in the entire game. Flanked by a squad of standard egg robos, his strategy is simple. He has rocket launcher, he has rocket, hedgehog, go boom. Firing salvos of 3 missiles at a time, you need to avoid the red ones and hit the blue ones to redirect them and whittle down his forces. I've always struggled to avoid the missiles because you need to take into account constantly moving and an uneven floor, so I do get hit, but I quickly learn a strategy to ensure I hit every blue missile. Just roll. I always forget you don't need to jump into them to destroy them, but this makes sure that you don't overshoot the target or end up jumping into a red missile. But with that plan in place, Heavy Gunner isn't too bad of a fight. He only takes 4 hits, and I get pretty lucky with the order of missiles, so I get a lot of hits in relatively quickly. I'm trying to figure out some way to throw a police brutality joke in here, but it just isn't getting anywhere, so let's move on to Act 2. Act 2 is where a lot more of the Hollywood aesthetic of Studiopolis comes out. It's there every so often in Act 1, but buried underneath the more generic Vaporwave City theme, but now it comes out in full force. Cameras and sound booths litter the foreground and background, along with studio lighting and movie gimmicks. I quickly come across another big ring by taking the uppermost path again and set out into another special stage. I used to really struggle with this emerald in particular, but with more practice under my belt, it's not too bad. You just need to take things slow and steady, and make sure that you keep your ring count topped up. In fact, I do well enough to get a bonus continue, which is pretty handy, as I remember Mania as being pretty harsh with restarts if you do lose all your lives. Then again, I finished this act with 10 lives, so hopefully I don't need to worry too much about that. After collecting my third emerald, I spent a fair while stuck on this particular wire switching area, before getting stuck going back and forth in this electric transporter, so it's safe to say I'm not getting a particularly great time at the end of this. But then, nothing really happens in the second half of the act. It doesn't help that most of it is just automated speed sections where you can just hold right, but all the input I actually have is screwing up this one jump, which seems like it might actually just save you time. The Studiopolis boss is the Weather Globe, one of Dr. Eggman's many Eggmobile variants. This one in particular is able to manipulate the weather, so you have to watch the weather forecast on the stage's background to recognise what attacks are about to be unleashed and then avoid them. This boss has never been particularly difficult, as every attack is really easy to avoid, but I remember it hovering high enough above you that you do need to exploit its attacks to actually hit it. Here, I somehow managed to hit it just by jumping, which I think is due to Tail somehow jumping higher, so Tail only manages to get a few attacks in before being defeated. From there, you open up the animal capsule, and watch a breaking news broadcast of the flying battery entering Studiopolis. Sonic and Tail somehow know exactly where in the city this is, and the last we see of them is them chasing it down and jumping on it. Cue then the next zone transition, but that'll be for the next episode, so I hope you enjoyed today's video, and ciao.